And joining us now to discuss this further is Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. He's also a former White House counsel to former President George W. Bush. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. So during the ceasefire, the Biden administration reportedly pressed Israel to conduct military operations against Hamas while limiting civilian casualties. We heard the vice president reinforce that there. But do you think that's a possible reality? And what do you expect to see in this next phase of the war?
Well, Alexa, obviously Israel is conducting these operations with every effort to minimize civilian casualties. I think the Israeli government well understands that every a woman or child that dies in this conflict, any civilian that dies in this conflict, that makes it harder for them to prosecute this war against Hamas and the like, and that actually Hamas benefits from every dead civilian. And so they're working as hard as they can to try and limit those civilian casualties. But in a tightly packed area like Gaza City and the south of Gaza, this is going to be difficult. And so it's important to be able to create those humanitarian spaces, move people into those spaces as Israel continues to prosecute what I think Vice President Harris correctly laid out is a lawful conflict to respond to and protect Israel from further attacks by Hamas.
And the White House has been steadfast in its support for Israel, saying it will support the Israeli military campaign in the south of Gaza only if Israel took concrete steps to limit casualties. Do you think there's a point, though, where the U.S. would publicly rebuke Israeli forces? And could U.S. aid be tied to how Israel carries out its mission?
Well, it's really a possibility. I think that would be a mistake. At the end of the day, Israel has a lawful right to respond to the attacks and to protect themselves from the threat posed by Hamas. And the question is, how do you do that in a way that minimizes civilian casualties, complies with the laws of war? And I think what you've seen is a strong effort to do that. Now, there have been altogether too many civilian deaths, but that is a challenge in a type of conflict of the kind that we've seen. We've actually seen, very troublingly, Hamas encouraging Palestinians to stay in the areas knowing Israeli ground incursions coming in. Half the problem is that Hamas realizes that it benefits from its own dead civilians. That's the really troubling part about this scenario. And so while the Biden administration is right to press and say we want to minimize civilian casualties, the idea that we would limit our support or tie our aid to however this war is prosecuted is potentially problematic.
In a Washington Post article, Itamar Rabinovich, a former Israeli ambassador to Washington, contends the United States and Israel are, quote, probably headed for a public break over what happens after the war in Gaza is over. Do you share that sentiment?
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, I think the Israelis have laid out what their plan is. Their plan is to take out Hamas leadership and reduce the ability of Hamas to operate, and then to clear out space between Gaza and Israel to create essentially a demilitarized zone. That's obviously going to be hard on that eastern border where the land is very tight. In the north, I think it'll be easier, and they've already cleared out some space there to date. And so we'll see how that goes. The U.S. has made clear that changing the borders of Gaza is not an option. The question is, what does that mean about a demilitarized zone? But the Israelis have made that position clear since the day this conflict began.
Definitely, as you said, a difficult path forward, and especially difficult for the citizens that are caught in the crossfire here. Jamil Jaffer, thank you so much for your time and expertise this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Alexa.